Hello, people. Today, Fanny Anzai interviews. I have with us Seth Andrews, the only, and not, he just told me, not the thinking atheist, but the host of the podcast YouTube channel, The Thinking Atheist, with more than 300,000 subscribers and more than 800 videos. It's a huge channel. And what, more like 10 years already? Thank you very much for coming, Seth. And
Oh,
welcome.
thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So is that 10 years already, your channel?
I think I started the YouTube channel in the website in 2009, so that's been 11 years. The podcast, and that's been 10 years, almost exactly 10 years. I think 10 years this month. So yeah, I've been
Oh,
around for about a decade. So
congrats.
thank
It's amazing. It's an
thank you.
amazing production. So in between so many videos, let's try to talk a little bit about atheism and the secularism, the separation of church, state, religions and government. I think is something very current in United States since Trump
Mm.
came in. The same thing with Brazil, with Bolsonaro. So you have a lot up to tell us. We have a lot to change.
It's been hard. I saw the rise of non-belief in this country. The United States is seeing religion culturally kind of, I don't know, it's deflating. People, they're not atheists necessarily, but they're non-religious. More and more, they don't necessarily go to church. They don't really need religion in their lives for goodness and purpose. And, the church is scrambling to try to stop the bleeding, right? They're trying to bring people in. And so I naively thought, well, that means that that's going to be reflected in government, right? We're going to see less religiosity in the halls of power. And instead, what we have seen is a power grab by the evangelical right that realizes probably the writing is on the wall, that long term, they are fighting a losing battle. And so they are rushing, they are scrambling, they are panicked, they are stacking the courts wherever they can, they are changing the laws wherever they can, they are bringing the evangelist into the White House whenever they can. They are trying to force Christianity back on this country in a way that we haven't seen, I don't think, since the mid 1950s. And it's scary because the United States is not a church. It was never designed to be a church. And so we've gotten so used to people violating the state church line. We've gotten so used to seeing the Franklin Graham, the Paula White, the Jerry Falwell Juniors, all of these evangelists just hobnobbing with Trump and Pence and everybody else, that we just shrug and accept it. And I'd like to see us come to the point when we again realize that this is not what the founders ever intended. It's anti-constitution. It's anti-American, really. Religious belief is a private thing. It is not a government thing. But it's kind of a scary time here in the States, for sure.
It is. It's a scary time around. It's scary that the 2020 we're going back to censorship and religious indoctrination, things that we thought we have gone over the last century. Like, yeah, we learned from dictatorship, we learned from all the religious so close to the politics, telling people, yeah, have more kids because we need more religious people. But we do have a new movement of young Christians and religious people that believe we need religiosity to have morals, and that it's how we're going to put people to behave properly. So I think there's a lot on the related to your history as well, because you're as a person, you suffered yourself like some religious indoctrination. Can you tell us a little bit how was that? You grew up a religious person, different from other atheists. I feel myself that I kept myself really anti-religious or atheist while growing, because I did not really have a religious indoctrination. I had people telling me, oh, we need, look around, we need a creator. And I was just like, no, that doesn't make sense. But I did not have anybody really sitting me down and telling me this is the truth, this is the right way of thinking. And which religion did you get indoctrinated by?
It was Christianity. My mother and father were devout believers. My mother taught New Testament Greek, and she does that even today. She's 83 and she still teaches. And there was so much Bible, so much God and Jesus, and so much Christianity in our lives. I mean, we went to church, we watched church on television, we had Christian music, we wore Christian t-shirts, we had Christian conversations, all of our friends were Christian, everything was Christian. And so it was my normal. As I grew up, I never knew any difference. How lucky I am to have been born into the right faith with these thousands of religions in the world. And look at me, I'm born into the right one. I was a student leader in school. I went to Christian school, and so I stood on stage and professed my faith. I got into broadcasting. I became a Christian radio host in 1990, and I was a Christian radio host for 12 years. We played Christian music, Amy Grant, Michael W. Smith, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Whiteheart, all that stuff. And my parents were so proud.
You're like Matt Dillahunty. You guys were like the deep root of religious people that came out.
It's funny because people will sometimes say, well, you guys never really believed. Yeah, you were never a Christian. And I think to myself, oh man, if I wasn't a true Christian, nobody was. I mean,
nobody is anymore.
I was all in. Like I totally believed. And so anyway, I was 37. I was 37 before I finally started to seriously ask any questions.
This was just like because your parents were inside the church and the community is so comfortable in some. Yeah.
It's normal. I mean, if everybody's doing it and everybody's saying it, it's so normal that you don't just receive it because it's normal, but you feel like if I challenge this, I'm the broken one. There's something wrong with me. I'm abnormal. It's a whole culture designed to keep you in a box, And when everybody around you thinks like you and acts like you and talks like you and worships like you and votes like you, there's a lot of pressure not to break that cycle, But when I hit midlife, I just got tired of not knowing. And so there was a series of things that happened that caused me to start questioning.
It's more like it's interesting because I think that is a human thing. It's a human behavior. It's a natural human behavior to try to conform, to feel comfortable, to feel part of a group. And that is the feeling that pretty much all religions give to new guests. You come enter any religion, any church, an open door church, and they're going to be awesome. They're going to be very welcoming, and you're going to feel comfortable and part of the group. And it is, like you said, it keeps you there. And the way that the religions keep you from coming out is exactly with the idea of you can't contest, you can't doubt. My problem to be indoctrinated at first was like that because I wanted explanations. So it did not work with me at first time. It's like, okay, the creator, that everything, the first premise is everything needs to be created. So therefore a creator, where did he come from? And they like, oh no, he was like, no, your first premise is broken.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not going to accept. He needs to be more complex, and to be more complex than everything, he would have to come from somewhere. And the first story they told me was just so broken I could not take. But I think, when did you, like, from becoming, so how did you actually, just curiosity, or there was someone that took your hand and helped you come out? Because this path to becoming an atheist, it's much harder and difficult than be a religious person in this community. So
well, you were a lot smarter and faster than I was. You were asking questions. I envy you. I wish I'd stopped and said, hey, wait a minute. Explain the book of Genesis to me, this creator. Where did that come from? And how did Noah's Ark work? That doesn't make any sense. And yeah, I wish
But
I'd been
but
there.
that is why I think it's so difficult. That's why I think it's so important for us to try to stop somehow the type of religious indoctrination and start giving more religious education, because no kid or very few kids are going to be able to wait a minute, this story doesn't make sense. What we do when we're kids, we accept what the adults tell us because they are telling us the truth. They are the ones, giving us the care. They are the caregivers, and they're our safety, our security. So when they come and tell us the stories, like, there is this old guy that lives in the sky, and all that, the George Carlin story, that thing for us is not ridiculous. It's like, okay, it's just, it sounds ridiculous, but it might be true. If this is the person that gives me food and protects me, why I would not believe him? you know and it's funny because they break down with a lot of the other myths and legends, the the Easter bunny, the tooth fairy, the all the other things, the boogeyman, everything goes away. But why God's dead? Why we still? So it's like God, the boogeyman for adults, like, that will
I hear you.
force you to be good,
I
but
hear you.
not really, because people that say they believe, they actually don't follow their own rules, or they would not be bad when
Well,
they're not
you had
being watched.
asked me, what the catalysts were for me. I wrote about this in my autobiography, Deconverted. There were a couple of major events. When I was in Christian radio, we had the death of a Christian singer-songwriter. And I remember we were going on the air to talk about how God had called him home. We came up with this sort of happy ending to a terrible story. He died horribly. And that, in my mind, that was one of the first times I really started to doubt, like, this doesn't make sense. 9/11, the attacks of 9/11, everybody was talking in religious language about it. And that kind of rattled my cage. But for me, what really set me on my journey, I had heard and I knew about him a little bit, about Christopher Hitchens. And I work for a video company. I was doing graphics work. And so I thought, well, he's an intriguing sounding guy. And I pulled him up on YouTube, and I found a debate. It was him and a rabbi, Rabbi Shmuley Botiak, at the 92nd Street Y in New York City, debating on God, the existence of God, the validity of the Bible or the Torah or whatever. And, I was still a believer at the time. And I figure, well, if anybody can defend the Bible, it's going to be a freaking rabbi. Anybody who can defend God. I'm not Jewish, but he's probably got this. And so as I watched the debate, the guy I was supposed to disagree with was the one making the most sense. Christopher Hitchens was like, he was so together and he made such good points. And so after that, I found somebody else. And who's this Richard Dawkins guy? And he mentioned Dan Barker. Well, who's Dan Barker? So I clicked him. And who's Sam Harris? And I clicked him, and I started buying books, and I just dove in, and man, I remember thinking, why have all these people been hidden from me? And the truth is that they hadn't been hidden from me. I had been hidden from the world. I'd been in this box. I was the sheltered one, and I just devoured it. I just couldn't stop. I was obsessed day and night. I was watching and reading and learning, and at the end of the road, I just, like 2008, I just realized I just don't buy it. I don't believe it. And I was scared. It was a pretty scary time for me because I still believed in heaven and hell for a long time, So I'm like, well, if I'm wrong, I'm going to hell. That's spooky. It took me another year to get over that. So that's how I got out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I never bought much of the hell, just because there were already other religions around that I could see they had the same uh, arguments. So everybody was just talking about the holy book and some personal experience. And later in life, it's funny because when I was a kid, I did not have any supernatural belief more than people telling me there are those things. And I would be like, okay, maybe there are ghosts. Oh, I was afraid when I was a kid of ghosts. There was some fire in the house when we were out once, and then I believed that's like, oh, maybe those ghosts, the ones that set fire in the house when we were not here.
Mm.
And so I was still like, but the idea of like we cannot disprove all the imaginary and supernatural beings was something fascinating for me. That's like, okay, there is a lot of things we cannot explain, and maybe there are some of those supernatural beings are real. We just cannot detect them with, the same, the apologetics idea. We just cannot detect them. They exist out of our sense, our sense and capacity of perceiving reality. It's limited. But then later I was, okay, but the hell, if I go to this one or the Christian one, what about the other ones? I'm going to all the other hell. So I guess it's better I don't bet in any of them. Go to just one more.
Yeah.
you know?
Well, hell's a convenient way to keep people in line, isn't it? I mean, you scare them and you tell them if you screw up, you'll be tortured. I mean, that's a pretty effective mechanism for keeping people from asking too many questions. And the
It
church
is.
is not the church likes to say that that God welcomes your questions, but it's rigged because what they're saying is, well, ask all the questions you want, but if the answer comes back and it's not God, you did it wrong. So, they don't really, it's not a culture of curiosity and honesty with yourself. And beyond all the love language, Jesus loves you, God loves you so much that he died on the cross for you. And, you're the most incredible, important child in the universe, blah, blah, blah. Beyond all that, it's a threat. If you screw up, if you don't pledge your allegiance, if you don't say the prayer, you will, depart from me into a lake of
I saw
fire.
you were sharing yesterday the epic debate Matt Delahanty with they were who was it?
Ray Comfort.
Ray
Oh,
Comp
it's
and
excruciating.
oh my god, it was yeah.
Excruciating. Oh,
I thought it was pretty interesting the time that I hop on the conversation and he was so into like, no, I accept evolution. And I was like, oh wow, that is amazing. If he accepts evolution, we're all done with the religion because then he needs to explain why Jesus needed to die on the cross if Adam and Eve never existed, because I guess evolution defeats Adam and Eve idea.
yeah.
And I just did not stick around to see what he would come out. I don't think it was the way that the conversation went, but
Well, and,
it's
and
just
Ray doesn't debate. Ray
it's
mostly
amazing.
just spends the time saying, "I love you, Matt. I'm praying for you, Matt. I'm here because I'm concerned for you, Matt." And he just does that nauseatingly condescending thing where he's not really talking or proving his position. He just quotes the Bible to prove the Bible and then tells you that he loves you in the love of the Lord and that you need Jesus. And it's
Yeah.
maddening because, you with Ray, you never get to the issues. You never
Yeah,
get him to
he will
address.
never answer your questions. He will defeat all the questions with saying some other thing, other religious, delivering other religious message
Yeah.
is what he's doing. It's not a partner conversation, and it's sad because, yeah, just like bringing all the inconsistencies of Bible. It's not that he's actually making any sense. He's just displaying them around.
The only reason I support a debate like that, I mean, you'll never convince Ray Comfort, and I like to think that most people you don't give up on them, right? Most people, I mean, if my mind can be changed, if my mind can be changed, it is possible. But, there are some people I think it's just a waste of your time. Ray's one of
Yeah.
those guys, but I do think it has utility to have both Matt and Ray giving their positions publicly so that people can see the claims presented and or backed up or refuted or whatever. But it's hard to watch, and I,
It is.
I'm sure Matt probably banged his head up against the wall whenever he was done because that was excruciating. But it's out there on YouTube. It's I think the channel's called Modern Day Debates. somebody wants to go look it up, I think you can find it.
Yeah. I will link everything we're talking about. I can link here in the description. I put all the links available. Sometimes I put the cards around the video. But I think it is important, just like you mentioned, the video that made you see Hitchens, debating and making so much sense. I think that is the only way, and we need to be open to conversation, to have this conversation with people that we disagree, or we're never going to be able to find a common ground. And that is what I think we're lacking generally in not just the United States, in the whole planet. All the last since December, we are in discussions and conversation and controversial topics that people just hate each other and cannot even talk about. When it comes to politics, when it comes to climate change, gun control, any other subject under the umbrella of the politics and culture war, the racial, systemic racial problem in the United States, and on and on. And so I know you have interviewed, you have amazing guests on your podcast, and we have some in common. Many of yours I still wish to talk one day. I've seen you talking to Peter Boghossian, and he has this amazing book, How to Have Impossible Conversations, that tries to bring us to this middle ground, because I believe even if you're atheist or religious, no matter which religion you are, if you are moral and probably not dependent on your religion, we all just want the best to everyone. So we need to break down walls as different sects of religions and politics to try to talk about what is the best for everybody.
Yeah, I think there are some people who say, don't speak to so-and-so because you're validating them. And I get it. I try to take those on a case-by-case basis, but I hate it when somebody tells me who I can and cannot talk to. I've had a chance to think about this over the years and try to evolve my own point of view. And I get it. If there's a genuinely awful person who just wants the limelight and you're going to allow them to share your limelight or your platform or whatever, I mean, you have to evaluate what's the cost benefit on that. Is that just going to boost their signal and nothing will be accomplished? Or can it be a productive exchange in the arena of ideas? And I think this doesn't fit in a box. It doesn't fit in a Twitter post. These are complex issues. But I just reject this idea that somebody says, well, if you share a stage with so-and-so, you are complicit, you endorse them, you are them. There's
or you agree 100%, because I think that is very unrealistic.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody agrees 100% to anybody. We're
I mean,
probably
let's
going to
say I
find
wanted to
issues
talk to
that
a
we're
white
gonna
supremacist.
disagree.
If let's say a white supremacist wanted to stand on stage and debate me on my humanistic approach to human beings, humankinds across the racial spectrum, I can choose to engage and engage publicly so that the ideas could be presented to an audience. There are some people who would say, you've enabled a racist, you platformed a racist. By giving him airtime, you might be a racist, and they just wig out. But I think, people can be talked out of bad ideas. The way to defeat bad ideas is with better ideas. And if we stop talking, what really changes, So I try to err really on the side of speech. Let's keep talking for what that's worth.
Definitely. Yeah. This channel is definitely much more for free speech than everything. Of course, I think we need to always explain so people don't misunderstand what we understand of free speech. That is any speech that doesn't incite violence. So I guess this is pretty clear when I have people coming to my Discord and they ask like, oh, can I say anything? I was like, yeah, free speech. Just don't incite violence, because it's not under free speech.
The challenge, though, is that there are factions of people who believe that just by engaging with awful people, you are inciting. They think that language is violence. And
Oh,
I've
yeah.
actually had people say that, and I just disagree. Language has a lot of power to help or to harm, but I just don't think language is violence. And so there we find a little bit of a philosophical divide. You know, how does speech work? What are the effects of speech? And I just don't think speech is violence. I just disagree.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree that there is a proportional response to whatever you feel like. And I understand there is self-defense. We understand, we all know that self-defense exists, but we're talking about when you feel threatened by violence, you can be violent back. But speech, if you feel offended, you should just try to offend back and not punch someone in the face, because that is the problem with, and you see this happening because the Pope once told, not, I don't think it was this one, was the one before that said that if you say something about his mom, he would punch someone in the face. He actually said
I
that
think it
was
was the current, I
justified.
think it was Francis who said that.
Was this one? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh
think
yeah,
he
because
said you
Benedict
cannot say that.
went pretty fast, passed by, like he really,
Hmm.
yeah, he got
Yeah, I know.
sick. He got
And you know, this
he had
helped.
some pedophilia, something like that.
It helped to, I think, to enable people who say that if you criticize Islam, you're an Islamophobe. You can't say those things. And, you know, offense is sometimes given, but more often than we'd like to admit, offense is taken. Like I have to, at some level, whenever possible, control the buttons that other people want to push on me. There are a lot of damaged people out there, people who've been through traumatic experiences, who have reactions and who can be really harmed. I get that. I'm not trying to marginalize that. But you know, there are times we just need to grow a damn skin. You know, it's a tough world out there. It's not a nice
Parents,
world, and we're going to have to decide, am I going to play a totally reactionary game where I let other people push my buttons and I go into orbit? Or am I going to make a decision to choose my battles and move on, move past, ignore, brush aside, and continue the task at hand? That's not popular among some of my fellow liberals, unfortunately, but I think it would help us keep from wasting a lot of time. You know, if we stop giving oxygen to these people who are throwing stuff at us, stop taking offense at everything, and keep kicking. You know, I think that has merit.
I guess there is some type of a feeling of a, it's like you said, it's not that they do that rationally. The feeding the trolls, it's more a reactionary response when you read something and the trigger, you get triggered, and then you and the Twitter nowadays. I love the one of your recent videos that talking about tribalism and the how people feel divided and fight online, and sometimes even I even saw that video, so relatable to something I keep talking on the channel as what made most of us today believe that we people are mostly bad people, because that is not the truth.
Yeah.
If that was truth, we would not go to the street and ask, informations of to unknown people and feel so safe outside, then walk on the streets and be civil like this. So it is a filter. It's a filter of this woke reality, I believe, that
Yeah.
makes us believe we humans are bad, we are destructive, we are evil. No, that's not true. We are amazing. We are able to do good and bad things, and all depends on the process of our minds and how much reason we are using to make decisions. And but there is a filter because of more information. We have this globalization, this easy expressed news nowadays. We just receive so much bad stuff, or we see all the bad stuff that's going on, and we think like this is the reality and the reality is bad, when we should, like, we're just using the confirmation bias to believe we are bad, because if you actually look at the good things, it's so much more.
It's true. 100,000 planes take off and land in a single day. But, you don't read a headline that says 100,000 planes landed without incident today. It's the plane crash, right? It's the anomaly.
And they will talk about that crash for days,
Weeks.
weeks,
Yeah.
months, and yeah.
Every day people interact with each other with kindness and goodness and generosity and love and community. And that doesn't make the headlines. What makes the headlines are the people who do something awful to each other, and that becomes a point of attention on social media, and that becomes a flashpoint for outrage, and
I
then we
think,
begin to
yeah,
get
we
discouraged.
saw what happened with I point out as climate change, but it came in December with climate change, and they took Greta, and then Greta was that pivot point on like you like or you hate, and if you and there was no nuance on the conversation what is being highlighted, because there were people in the middle like, look, I'm not a science denier. I just don't think Greta brought anything new to the conversation, and I think they are using her as a shield to not be criticized because she's a kid with problems. And it's evil that they are abusing these kids with these problems like that. And it's terrible that there are people that only know about climate change now with her, because I've heard of this years, decades ago.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of the conversation on when we need to set those, like, it's not left or right, it's not pro-life or pro-abortion, or and there is much more in the conversations that it's so polarizing nowadays. So I love the your video, the one that talks about tribes and everything. But I need to talk about my favorite video, that is actually the Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot, because this is a 3 years old video and it will only age well. I want to talk about old videos because I bet people would just jump on your channel, and because you have like more than you have 822 videos today. I checked just before the interview.
Mm.
And they are going to just go through that huge sea of videos and probably see the most recent one. So I want to point out that it's like probably the best, the piece of art you've made, and it's amazing. Collecting all the memes and the videos, it's an amazing show. It should be a DVD.
It's a speech I gave in Canada 3 years ago. It's fun, it's funny, but it's also true. The stuff you say when you're religious, it doesn't make sense. Like, you just don't realize how crazy you sound. And so I went through in the speech all of these things, whether it's blessing the turkey at the dinner table, or, dear Lord, please guide the hand of the surgeon as you pay for scientists to go in and do medical work, and all the weird rationalizations we have about how everything in the world happens for a reason, which is just crazy. I mean, I think we see people who are trying to create the happy ending to really bad stories, or just not being sure. We don't like to not be sure. We want to know. And so if we don't know, we find a way to know. So we sort of fill in the blanks and color between the lines, and we decide, well, it's all happening for a reason. And so the speech itself is sort of a romp through a lot of the language that I used to say when I was a believer. So thanks for the kind words on that. It's funny, I just hit 1 million downloads or 1 million views on it, which is crazy. But I'm really proud of it.
It's an amazing video. But I feel so I actually had some type of rage this week, and I end up venting a lot on my Twitch last night about all the religious inconsistencies and all the cognitive dissonance of religious people giving the credit to these imaginary beings. I just had an encounter this week with a post of a friend. She had a baby with problems in December, almost died, would die, just born. If it was in nature and according to the God's wills, it would probably come out of her and die. Okay? But no, we had doctors that put the tube on its throat and kept it alive for months in the ICU, and physiotherapy and respiratory physiotherapy and doctors and medicine and machines and exams. And now the kid is back home and is growing well with limitations. But thanks God,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So this week I just see her sharing a picture of the baby doing physiotherapy at home and raising the head first time, and she was so emotional, and she had to send this huge message to talk how she is grateful for God's working on the baby's life to make it alive and doing that thing in the middle of the physiotherapy. But thanks God. And not even 1 minute talk about anybody or any effort that the people and we humans have, done to be at that moment. And I was like, I had to comment, of course, being nice and being kind, but I did have my vent like in the back.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, yeah, thanks. I'm really happy that with all the work, the team, and the efforts, but she's doing that well. I'm really happy for her, for
Yeah.
all the family, and because the family also suffered so much, they were all apart. That she had to be in another city, taking care, like breastfeeding, like giving the breast at some moments, or even being by the hospital. So she was in another city, far from the whole family. And it's like, what is all this effort? You guys, we all made this, and not God. God has nothing to do with it. In God's will, the baby would be dead, just born and dead, and they
Or
can't see
God
it
could reach down and immediately heal the child completely.
if he
What
existed.
a
If
miracle
he
it would be.
existed.
I mean, if you needed greater, what a great proving exercise that would be for God to materialize and produce a tangible miracle right there, allow it to be measured and documented without question. And yet, God sits back and makes it look like it exactly would if only scientists had intervened. My father was in the hospital earlier this year. And I remember there were texts, praying, pray for dad, praying. No one's talking about the doctors. And I was like you. I had that moment of rage where I was just like, somebody mention the physicians that are actually caring for the man. And I think I actually jumped in, don't forget to thank the healthcare workers who are, is sitting at his bedside 24 hours a day. But it's frustrating to have to do that. It seems so obvious, right? That
So
frustrates
obvious
me.
and so frustrating to say that and actually be kicked out of a physician's group.
I'll buy that. Yeah, I'm sure it happened. I'm sure it happened.
Yeah, no, I actually have lost pretty much, I would say pretty much all my friends, old friends, because as I mentioned, I was like an atheist by definition since they tried to indoctrinate me when I was 6 years old. But I only came out of the closet 10 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, that breaks my heart.
In Brazil, it's really hard to do it. I had this fear before I completely done, and I was surprised with so much bad reaction I had. Was a little bit what pushed me to move to Canada, uh, because it's really hard to be a non-believer in Brazil with 86% of the population Christian. It's uh, it's immoral to not have God in your heart.
Mm.
And that is something like a popular common sense that people say that like on TV, and groups like Ateia, that is the atheist and agnostic community in Brazil, have been able to put lawyers and sue uh, some people publicly and make them say sorry, because that is not the propaganda we want to, the generalization we want to have in making public opinion. But it
So
is
they
really
wait.
hard.
If you're not a believer in Brazil, there's enough pressure that you have to recant or you have to apologize for spreading the wrong message.
Oh, in Brazil, you're supposed to believe something. So that's why I went through from Christianity, that was the closest on my community. I went to Spiritism, and then I read books of other things and other beliefs and tried to conform and adjust to many different beliefs until I was 21 or something like that, because it was just not okay to not believe in anything. You have to believe something. If you
Yeah.
don't believe in our God, at least you believe in the evangelic one, because that is just the church across the street, and it's fine. We just don't like the same things and we talk shit about each other, you know.
Yeah.
But it's fine. But they at least they believe in God too. It's more like this, and they don't like the Umbandis or the other African descendant beliefs that they have in Brazil, because they are polytheists and they do rituals and they call it black magic. So yeah, the religions in Brazil, they are not together. So it's one of my points on the religiosity doesn't unite people, it segregates people because they don't like each other, or they would only have one huge church where everybody goes. That would be definitely some type of union, and I would be like, okay, maybe the church is actually working to unite people, but it's not what's happening there or here. I'm in a area close to Vancouver where it's kind of the Bible Belt of Canada, and they have one church every corner, so I guess they don't get along either.
Yeah. That's a good point. Religion likes to say it's a great unifier, but here in the United States, if you see the First Baptist Church, another block, there's the Second Baptist Church, the Third Baptist Church, the Free Will Baptist Church, and then there's the Methodist and the Lutherans and the Episcopalians and the non-denominationals and the Assemblies of God, and
The
and
Pentecostals and on, yeah.
they all disagree with each other, and so they splinter off into their little pods where they get to be theologically superior. And I think if God is not the author of confusion, according to Scripture, can you think of a religion more confusing than Christianity? I mean, they can't agree on the basics. They can't agree on eternal salvation. They can't agree on heaven and hell. They can't agree on baptism. Do you get the Holy
I
Spirit when
guess
you
those
say the
gods
salvation
came
prayer?
really straight from those Greek gods that were, in fact, like hate humanity.
Yeah,
And they just wanted us to destroy each other. So just let them believe in different gods and they will destroy themselves.
yeah.
Because if there was one only God, I would expect him to have stepped up at some point. It's like, hey guys, I'm this guy and my name is this. Stop cutting each other's heads off. Don't burn. Stop this fight. It's all loving. Like humans are all the same. Why are you all fighting?
I would like that. That needs to be a bumper sticker. Hey, God, step up. That's a bumper sticker. I like that very much. So, two
Let's
thumbs
do
up.
that campaign.
I like that.
Hmm. You personally have suffered like to lose someone because like just to cut, or you like, yeah, I left the entire community behind. How was that? If you were so
Well,
there.
I talk about my family a little bit, actually
Hmm.
a lot on the show, and I feel kind of bad about it because it's like the audience is like my bartender. I'm like, I just gotta talk about what's going on in my life. It's just been a terrible day, and I'll do that on the show. And I always feel a little bit guilty,
I
because
couldn't do that.
do they care? Is the audience tired of all this? But the short version is that you can imagine my parents were so proud of me when I was a believer, doing God's good work, and I'm doing ministry and all that. Well, man, their worst nightmare is an atheist activist son. This is their worst nightmare, and it's been horrible. I mean, it's not as bad these days. Everybody's calmed down. But for years and years, I mean, there were tears and shouts and angry phone calls and long emails and long texts, and about how broken I was and how I can't possibly have purpose or goodness or happiness, and I'm an embarrassment to the family. And it got so bad that for a period of a couple of years, I just had to block them, and I warned them, like, you don't get to do that. You don't get to. We can disagree, but you don't get to tell me that I'm all these horrible things and threaten me with hell. And you don't you get to do that. And that's a boundary violation. And if you do it again, I'm going to block you so that you are not in my circle. And immediately they responded with hell threats and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, click. And so we didn't have any interaction. And before that was tenuous anyway. I'd see him at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and there was always tension. But we just didn't speak. And that softened a little bit. I think we're trying. Dad's not in great health. He's 86. And he's got leukemia, and I think he really wants to try, but their perceptions of love and family are still filtered through this superstition. And it's so hard because I can feel it when they look at me. Oh, he's so deceived. Oh, he's so wrong. Oh, he's so shameful. And so I'm trying to see them as victims of religion.
Yeah.
And we've been doing better. I've lost friends. I've lost
Yeah.
people who it just was too much. They couldn't handle it, and so they just disappeared from my life. But I overall, family comes in so many forms. I mean, thanks to this community, I've got family all over the world. I've got people who act like family and love me and
Yeah.
support me, and vice versa. And it's not like I was born in freaking Saudi Arabia, where if I come out as
Yeah,
an
it could be
atheist, they
much
cut my
worse.
freaking head off. So I mean, I can bitch and moan about my troubles as an atheist in the United States,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
overall,
to
I
lose
get it.
friends and close circles. But I think a little bit what we mentioned before. People have those patterns of behaving in tribalist way to try to be more comfortable and conform with their community. So that's why we make pockets, even if we're trying to not segregate, we end up doing that. And in some way, I believe the religious people, their reaction, it is the same thing we talked before. It's like how we need to rely more on reason and less in emotion reaction, because that would be the first thing to do when you just find out that someone is atheist or is religious. If you were an atheist activist, that will close the door to a religious person, or if you were a religious person, that will close the door for another religious person that is not from yours, or for to an atheist. That is the reaction we want to stop doing, so we can all sit and talk and maybe go over those differences, because those are not important difference. Are we not all humans and we're all not all good? I had this experience when I came out atheist, was in 2014, I think. So it was not even 10 years ago. It was 6 years ago. I was already working in emergency ambulance as a doctor in emergency ambulance. And in Brazil, not because it's healthcare, but in Brazil, most of people are religious. And of course, we have a lot of religious into that area because they believe God is acting through them.
Yeah.
And they're very religious. And the ones that are religious are very much, and they want to pray at work and do stuff. And it was when I came out atheist, and I was already working there for a few months, and everybody loved me. And one day there was a situation, something like, let's pray. And I was like, oh, no, thank you. I'm an atheist, but I can stand here. No, no problem. No, I do that when I
Mm.
go to Christmas, Easter, all the religious stuff. Uh, I actually made a fake ceremony, religious ceremony for my wedding. So for the people that want to have that, I'm fine. I was like, no, no problem. My parents made so much, like, oh, we're gonna do if you don't. I was like, okay, I'll contract someone. It's not even like I'm supposed to be a Christian. That is a real an atheist, and I contracted an evangelical pastor just to do a ceremony in a nice place, so my religious friends could have their religious
Yeah.
ritual
I mean,
that they wanted so much.
I think ritual has a place. I mean, these practices like that, I think, help to frame the human experience. So I think it's funny when you said you were working in with the ambulance. I had a friend who was a paramedic, and the stories he would tell over dinner, I would be like, "What?" He said, "Oh yeah, we went to somebody's house and they did that. We found them in this position, or we found that they had done this," and I was just like, and I think I look at you and I'm like, "Oh my God, she must have some stories." I mean,
Yeah, there
wow.
are many stories, but mostly was just so weird when I came out. I had some people like taking me privately, saying, trying like in the corner, in the corridor, hey, can I talk to you? And I was like, yeah. And a couple, like probably a handful of people pulled me on the side to say, like, I'm so impressed you're an atheist. You're such a good person. I
Mm.
can't believe that. And I was just, that was the first time I understood or I realized the importance of being an activist, of being an atheist activist, was because before that I was mad at my husband trying to even talk to people about atheists. I was like, let's be an atheist and leave people alone. We don't need to be the activist. We don't need to. No, I would think that it was indoctrination, and it's not. It's an education. The same way that I think we should maybe put religious classes in public schools, in all the schools. But we're not going to just teach Christianity. We're going to teach religiosity, and we're going to read religious books. And then you're going to have the chance to find the real God. Because if you were only presented one, I guess you could be committing a terrible mistake.
I love the idea. I love a comparative religions class. Okay, here's this religion, here's their God, here's their book, here's what they believe, here's how they think the universe started, here's their salvation, here's their heaven, here's their hell. Okay, here's religion number two. And you do the same thing and you do the same thing and you just line them all up. I have heard from people on my show who they didn't take a comparative religions class till they went to college, right? But it was when they saw the religions kind of laid out on a table side by side, that's when they thought, hey, wait a minute. Hey, these are all sort of, they're doing interpretive dances to the same song. Like, this is all superstition. Like, and they had that moment where, well, if I'm going to criticize Islam or Hinduism or Scientology or Mormonism, etc., why am I not lending that same critical eye to my own faith? And that began their journey out. Those are inspiring stories for me. But I agree. You and I are on that page. I think let's teach what religions are. Let's teach it in high school. Here's what the major beliefs of the world do and think. Here's what they worship and why. And then let the kids digest all of that. And it might lead to critical thinking when it comes to the religion of their families and cultures, for sure.
Definitely. Someone that did something not exactly what I said, but similar on exposing different cultures. And I dream on interviewing him one day. It's Carl Benjamin, the Sargon of Akkad. He has the Thinkery is the other channel than Sargon of Akkad, and I think in the Thinkery he has all cultures are beautiful. Something like this is the series that actually he talks about religious on Middle East, Indian religiosities that actually oppressing, killing, massacring, mutilating people, and exploring, exposing all this idea of those moral religiosity for people that actually believe we need religions for having morals. And I think he break down a little bit of that idea, and it's something we need to talk about today.
Yeah.
So, one thing I really would like us to approach, and I think people, even nowadays, the religious people that are on the wall, there's a lot of people, religious people, that question and doubt their religions, mainly because they have more access to all these videos of us talking like, why your God and not the other ones? Because they all have the same arguments, they all have the holy book and personal experience. And in these two arguments, these two legs of belief, I could believe in any other belief. So why pick and choose this specifically? But I think more it's people looking up to us saying, like, okay, you atheists, you guys don't believe in anything. How can you guys have morals? And I think that is the next step. We need to start talking more as atheists to show, like, look, we have showed you that religiosities and religions are very, it's a very arbitrary and subjective way to find moral. So we want some type of objectivity, and where we should rely that is in the science, because evolutionary scientists can explain why not just humans, but other species help the same of them. And we humans would say we are superior in that way. And we're not evil like people believe, because we actually try to help not even just the same of us that cannot succeed, but the planet and the other species. Even if our actions are naturally destructive to the planet, we're still trying to do the best.
Yeah,
And
I have a
yeah,
couple of thoughts on that.
yeah,
I think you're absolutely right that there are a lot of people who are on the wall watching. And that's why, whenever possible, and it's not possible for everybody, but I think it helps for us to be out as atheists and to mingle with people who disagree with us, right? Because otherwise, they've been looking over across the field. Oh, there's the atheist over there. There's the heathen. But if they get to know you personally, you totally screw up all their categories. Well, I was told you weren't able to be happy, but you are happy. I was told you didn't have any morals, but you're moral. I was told you couldn't have any purpose or you didn't believe in anything important, but you do. I was told you couldn't really love, but you do, and it just messes people up. So now they're starting to chew on what they've been indoctrinated with versus what they're presented with firsthand. And if you have the opportunity, tell somebody, in organic conversation, but be true to yourself. You never know who's watching. The second thing is that I just hate the moral argument. Yeah, as far as, well, the Bible you must have to be a moral person, because first of all, cultural Christians in the United States don't know anything about their Bible. Secondly, whenever they distance themselves from the awfulness in the Bible, the slavery, the beating of slaves, the banishing of women, the silencing of women, the genocide, the infanticide, blah, 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 human sacrifice, and you ask them about it, they reject that. Well, what's happening? They're making a moral judgment outside of the Bible. They say they need to be moral. They're having to walk away from that Bible and go, well, I reject that, without being aware of the irony that they are making a moral judgment without the Bible. And so I just hate the moral argument. But I
yeah.
think there's utility in drawing attention
Did
to
you
that when
read
they
more
do it.
the Bible when you were religious or after you left?
I knew a lot of my Bible, but it was all cherry picked. Like I knew basic stories, but here's a great example. Like I always thought of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood as a good story because we focused on the salvation of 8 people and the animals, and God rebooted the planet, and then he said he'd never flood the earth again, and there was a rainbow, and there were doves, and there was music, and you know, and,
I
and
love that.
when I
It's
was,
such a
and we
fascinating
didn't,
story.
we didn't stop to think about the bodies bumping up against this freaking boat, the corpses of millions of people floating out. We just didn't spend any time on that. And so it was after I left, or I started to doubt really, that I went back to square one and read the Bible again. I know the Bible a lot better now than I ever knew it when I was a Christian. And it's one of the reasons I reject it, because I've read the whole thing more objectively, not like a love letter, but I just read it. And you know what? The moral compass I use to assess those stories, it exists far outside the Bible, and it's more effective than the Bible.
Yeah. In your video, the Christianity made me talk like an idiot. I feel so much empathized by that video, specifically when we talk about the moral uh, role of the Bible, because I used to be a Christian, like when people ask me. So I did not believe, I did not accept the premises, but every time someone asked me, are you religious? And I was like, yeah, I'm a Catholic, not practitioner of it. And I would use it, and they're like, what does it mean? I was like, oh yeah, no, my parents are kind of Christian. I was born and baptized. I just don't go to church,
Yeah.
but I kind of follow, the values. And they were like, which values? Like, oh, because I believe the Bible is the moral code, so I'm following them. But I never read. I used to say that, and I would say like, but I believe it is a beautiful, amazing book because it's the Holy Bible. No, it's holy, so
Yeah.
of course it's amazing. It's gonna be there like the best things in the world. So whenever I read, because I know it's gonna be the way that I live my life and the things I believe are gonna be there. But I never read. So when I read, I was really enraged because I was like, I can't believe I said this was my moral code. I'm just so ashamed. Of course, I'm not going to do anything that is in here. This is a book of the immoralities. Did they write this thing maybe to tell us don't do it? It's like, I did not get. It's like a penal code of the period. So I had like many hypotheses. Like I start raising hypotheses of like why they would write the book the way that is written. And I was like, in the end, I was like, okay, I can't accept it. It's okay, it's meta, and I passed through the metaphorical explanation of the Bible. I said, this is, of course, God did not make, I had not accepted when the creation idea, I was like, okay, that is just book for kids. That's why Genesis is the first one you read for the kids, and it's just a nice story to try to represent the complexity of the creation through a kid story. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny too when you say that. Well, I'm a Catholic, but I'm not really a practicing Catholic, which is interesting because what you'd say is, well, I'm Catholic, but I'm not, right? Because if you really believe it, you would practice it. And
You
I
have
hear that
to.
all the time in Christianity. Like, oh, I'm a Christian, but I'm not a practicing Christian. Well, wait a minute. You either
I believe
are.
God, but I don't practice any religion.
I believe that it's true, but I don't apply it to my life. I just think that doesn't make any sense. It's another example. Christianity makes you talk like an idiot, and that applies to a lot of religions, And if you really thought it was true, why wouldn't you be eager to apply it to your life? I don't think those statements make any sense together, for sure.
Yeah. And so right after coming out of atheism, you decide like I need to be an activist. That trigger is like because I don't want other people to go through this type of indoctrination. And what do you think about politically speaking? I really have this question in my mind because I'm very libertarian, and I don't think we should be telling as a government. I don't think we should have government or gods or any higher power telling us how to live our lives. But in the same way, I see what you experience, and I did not experience in my life, but I see other families. Maybe what my brother. That it's funny you talking about family, but I have a very evangelical brother that probably will end up being a pastor one day, and goes through the indoctrination of his first child right now. That's I don't think they consume any other media than evangelical.
Mm.
And I'm very questioning in my mind every time I talk about this is how I still believe their private life and they have the right to do that, but and where is the line where the government should stand for any type of indoctrination or abuse of child, even if it's just psychological and if it's okay because it's normalized.
Yeah. Well, it's a sticky point. It's like watching my own sister religiously homeschool her kids. I can't tell her how to raise her children, and I shouldn't be able to cross that boundary. But at the same time, I still grieve that they're being brainwashed into superstition because this may negatively affect the rest of their lives. The only solution I've got is to try to be the antithesis of that, to live a secular life, a non-superstitious life in full view so that they can kind of see me. And then if they come to the point when they have questions, maybe they'll come to me and ask when they're older.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's hard, it's one of those catchy things where you can't cross somebody's boundaries and live their life and tell them you will raise your children like this. I don't support the government doing that. But at the same time, don't kids have the right to discover what their own identities are? And how do
Yeah,
you?
and mainly we talk about how the government is that power to protect the kids from the bad things. And if that is a type of negative things, maybe it should be taken as, some measures. I don't know. I'm
I
very
don't know.
against taking
I don't
measures,
even know
but
what that looks like. Like,
Yeah, I
I
don't
feel
know,
you.
but I do think it's interesting that the religious people that want to infiltrate politics to indoctrinate kids, even in public schools, I think we should maybe give them some power, you know, and then come with with the religious education instead of religious indoctrination. In the same way that, oh, we want to just put crosses everywhere. Okay, what about the Satanists? They also have, freedom, religious freedom. So can they put their Satan monument in the middle? They're like, no. It's like, no, no. Now we're talking about religious freedom. Everybody
Yeah.
has the same, and that's how I love that that show, the Hail Satan. I don't know if you
No,
watched
it's a
it.
great documentary. It's a
Yeah,
great documentary.
yeah. And I've thought about talking of it here with some guests, and just sometimes we just lose and talk about something else. But I think I have received from people that are on the wall messages on like talking about meaning of life, and I would like us to talk a little bit of this, because I think this most of religious people that believe that the straw man of atheists, that they don't have morals and that they don't have meaning, or the most important points that keep a lot of people from accepting themselves atheists, when they already rejected all the religious doctrines and they already live pretty much secular, but they still avoid the word atheist. Uh, of course, there are many atheists that maybe make a bad impression online because they are more mocking religious people and not really having honest conversations. But I think there is this fear of losing morality and losing meaning. And we can actually talk a little bit on our sides, because at least on my personal experience, I felt I gained much more of both after I let go of this need of having a title of some group of religiosity, or say that I believe in God. When I let go of this belief of God is responsible for things, and I took agency of my life, I gained much more moral standards, because then I would have to hold on myself, and meaning as well, to understand. When I talk to Lawrence Cross, that I know you have talked to him too, I think the understanding of course, we're not going to understand everything, but when you understand a bit more of the universe, you actually gain a lot of more meaning. You see how you're lucky, really, to be alive, and every second matters so much. Then
Well,
I have this life after that I can spare, whatever.
there's this myth that if you don't live forever, why bother? I just don't get that. Like, if I'm not going to
It's
go to
the
heaven
opposite
and live
way.
forever, why would you even bother being alive? And I think, this idea that something has to last forever to be beautiful is crazy. The analogy I use is my favorite song has a final note, but I still love the song. My favorite food has a final bite, but I still love the meal. Loving someone who dies before I do. I've lost them. They were here temporarily. Wasn't that love worth having? And so this idea that something has to be eternal to have value is just crazy. In fact, I think the temporary nature of life, the fact that there is no tomorrow, or there may be no tomorrow, I mean, it makes everything more critical. On top of that, I like the fact that we get to generate our own sense of purpose. Someone else doesn't say, you will be this, you will act like this, you will pursue this in your life. Instead, I get to look around and say, well, who am I? What are my values? What's my identity? What do I care about? What are my goals? What are my dreams? And I get to formulate my own sense of purpose and generate it organically. When you do that, it's so much more satisfying. It's better on this side of the wall for sure. There's no doubt. It's just more light and air and space on this side of the wall. I would never go back. Never.
I think even the idea of like, if the people that have this idea of eternity, maybe they should feel motivated with the idea that maybe we could live forever. And maybe we have not been able to reach that because our science is being uh, held behind by religious indoctrination and religious uh, speed bumps that stop us from working on stem cells and so many other science that they believe, because of doctrines that don't have any science base, it stops us from maybe getting that. And I think it's more on the way that the eternity takes the value of this life. Because when I was a believer that maybe still has something after this, these moments, those things that happen, sometimes we don't care when we should care every second. It's so important when you have a limited life. And uh, like I mentioned, I believe in spiritism. So I had passed through a time that I really would believe, like, whatever bad or whatever not so good happens here, it's okay. There is a prize afterwards. And that loses the value or even your struggle into this life. And I see that happening to a lot of people that believes. I think it happened to me when I used to believe. And I think I lost quite a good time and reason, chances to use reason instead of feelings to decide things. And that is what I would like to people be free to make more rational decisions in their lives. One thing I like to mention is always remember that the atheists don't want to attack the gods or destroy the gods. We want we actually are open to whenever some evidence comes. So even for the religious people, they should see this more, it's more honest you not believe in anything when you don't have evidence than to just believe in something to conform or because it makes you feel good, because if in that way, why not believing in the other church, in the other God, go explore. I would like to people that all the religious people that send me religious memes, I always tell them, like, don't try to indoctrinate me. I know all these religions. I have like gone through that catalog and checked the options. You didn't. You're the one that needs to debate the Buddhists, the Hindus, the other guys, and prove then that your God is the real one and not to me. Because I'm going to accept whoever brings me evidence, but none of you guys still have. So one thing I want you to tell me just a little bit, how was that Ark encounter? It might be like amazing.
The Ark Encounter it's a quote unquote museum that was developed by Ken Ham of Answers in Genesis. Ken Ham is a young Earth creationist. He believes the Earth is 10 or 6,000 years old. And he's got some horrible ideas. And he built this $120 million replica of the Ark in Kentucky. And he got a bunch of tax breaks to do it, thinking it was going to be he sold it as a big tourist attraction. Matt Dillahunty and I went and toured the Ark Encounter, and it was just terrifying. I mean, it was mostly just a few displays, some stuffed dinosaurs, and a lot of stuff to read. And it was expensive. It's like, $10-15 to park, and I think the tickets to get in were $40. I only did it so that I could go shoot video to sort of reveal it for everybody else. But it's sad because we saw tours of young children brought in there who were being told, well, this is real. This is fact. You need to believe this. That hurts the heart. And it's one of the reasons I think we need to be out there publicly saying, no, we disagree with this, everybody. Hey, kids, keep asking questions because there's a lot of reasons to doubt this story. And but it's hard. And honestly, it was boring. Like after the first hour, we were kind of ready to be out. Like there's nothing
much to do there.
You just walk around and look at stuffed dinosaurs and read, and that's about it. It's really an anticlimax.
Better you take your kids to the zoo.
Yeah, take them to the zoo.
Okay.
Take them to the movies. Take them to the park. Take them somewhere. Don't take them to the Ark Encounter.
But it might have been like a funny walking around with Matt, you and Matt making jokes of it, and it's like just like.
Oh yeah. Oh, it was funny. Yeah, it was funny. Yeah, and but it's also it just makes you sad. You just think about the waste. I mean, imagine if they had used all that money to do something else. but
Are
instead
they actually,
$120 million.
do they do that all for profit, or they at least claim that they give for charity?
They're slippery. What they do is when they want to get tax exempt status, they claim that it's a ministry, a religion. But when they want to get the state to fund them with tourism dollars, then they route their information through corporations and act like a business. And it's just slippery and slimy. And I don't think it's going to last. I
Yeah, it's
can't
something
imagine.
that we have the same problem in Brazil with the financial situation of church. They don't pay taxes, and they make a lot of money. And I understand that the purpose of a church not paying taxes in the beginning was because the church supposed to be the government before the government came around, and then later they would be the exempting taxes because they would give to charity. But now there is no way to control what goes to charity, who is charity is, and it's just washed money by church, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a get out of taxes free card. It just makes me crazy. So,
Yeah.
whatever.
Some people have been smart enough, some secular groups have been smart enough to do like their, at least enter with the papers as they are another church in Brazil, and then they can have their clubs exempt from taxation. Yeah. So they have like a secular groups that do have meetings and do raise money for parties and stuff, and they cannot have the police complaining. So I actually have a friend, he has a lawyer friend that made this, and whenever the police hits their door at night, the neighbors are complaining about your party. He's like, he comes with the church papers. Like, no, it's a ritual.
Mm.
It's mass. It's religious freedom.
It's off the hook. That's interesting.
So he doesn't pay tax, and he can make like really noisy parties on his
That's interesting.
neighborhood. I guess, yeah, taking the loop. So I'm sorry, we are a little bit over the time. Can we just talk a little bit more?
Yeah, sure.
Is that fine? If
Yeah.
you want to take a pause, I'm fine with that too.
No, let's do it.
Yeah, okay. Because I wanted to talk just a little bit more on the idea of the atheism on responsibility and individualism, because I think that is another thing that is very into the political culture war. Nowadays, I love Tracy Harris from Atheist Experience, her and Matt Dillahunty, and I watched your video with her recently. Yeah, just out yesterday was when you released. Yeah,
Yeah.
I believe. And yeah, and I think that was a great conversation as well. I was just like very into talk about the political and cultural division in the United States, and maybe a little bit on the mainstream media narrative, because I think I don't know if you guys have this idea. I have talked to other guests about how maybe the whole situation with George Floyd and the other victims that were Black is a little bit of the nut picking of the mainstream media to display the systemic racism or police brutality driven by race specific. And I think it's an interesting conversation, because I think you guys are amazing and influencers, and I guess a lot of people watch that and talk about the same thing. And I fear a little bit that as has happened before in the atheist community, that would be like we're just talking about the non-existence of gods, or the non-evidence of existence of gods, and then we end up talking about so many other layers of the culture conversation, and we crash. We end up splitting the community into the atheist plus, if it's LGBT, if it's veganism, and on, if it's Trump or not. And I think that comes into very important conversation of the tribalism that has happened today. And I think it's parallel to maybe bring back to why we left religion. And I think the first thing I think is, at least for me, is because I thought all the religions are intolerant. And I would not like to see the atheist community become just another religious group in their, do not have that principle of free speech is the most important thing. So I don't know. I don't record right now because I talked to a lot of people, but recently I have talked to people about the George Floyd situation, and I watched the video, and I don't know, I watched the whole video and I saw that was a bad cop killing someone. Definitely needs to be, it was a crime. It needs to be punished. And I guess he was fired, he was charged. And I don't agree with the mainstream media talking about systemic racism because I don't see any evidence more than seeing people telling me it is because of the color of the victim and the perpetrator. And it's like, yeah, I noticed the cop was white. I noticed George Floyd is black. I did not see the evidence that the white cop killed that black victim because of race. And that is my issue, my skepticism on the narrative we have systemic racism in the United States. So I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about it and your opinion?
Well, as best I can from my vantage, I think because we are seeing a greater number of white on black violence within the police force, statistically, when you see those instances happen, I think we have to infer that there's a racial component to it. You're right. This does not fit in a box. And people I've seen, I lament many on even my fellow liberals. They're like, burn the cops down, set fire to the whole system. Damn it. They're all racist. And I hate generalities like that. All generalities are false is the clever line. Because I know people who are police officers, they do a terribly difficult job. And they are, they receive a lot of resistance from communities across the board. They, in many cases, are putting their lives on the line for not much appreciation. And it's funny because sometimes when you mention that, there are shades of extreme left or factions of the left who feel like, well, you're making excuses for a racist system. And that's what you're talking about. We're not able to discuss the fact that not all police officers are racist. And there are people out there who genuinely are grieved by the George Floyd murder. We'll call it murder, and want to fix the system. And it doesn't fit in a Twitter post. It doesn't fit in a box. You and I probably disagree a little bit on whether or not the police departments themselves have properly addressed potential racial issues and the violence carried out disproportionately against people of color versus white people. But this idea that
I like a little bit to do a little bit of that analysis with Thomas Sowell and Larry Elder. They talk a lot about that. They talk about if the judge on not the judge, sorry, if the referee on the basketball gives more cards to black players, is that racism, or is that because blacks are more involved in basketball? And that is actually something you can see, that the unproportional more young black people being killed by cops would be very reflective of them being involved into crime. So it's not that it's racist.
Well, and then you get into the systemic problems.
Like that too.
Then that opens up another door where we get into the fact of over the course of history. I mean, we've only seen the civil rights movement was just a few years ago.
Going to find some in the end of the line. There is very important political influence, definitely, on the culture.
We don't want to absolve people of individual and personal responsibility for their actions, but also we can see that there are people who have been locked out of opportunity in a lot of meaningful ways based on the color of their skin or the color of their grandfather's skin. And it's so hard, because at what point do you say, well, you were relegated to a community that would be impoverished and you had a greater likelihood of violence in your neighborhood and you had fewer opportunities for education. Those things are real and systemic, and we have to talk about them. But at the same time, that also seems to completely remove the idea of individual responsibility. And, at what point
Yeah,
do
and I
we
love
use it?
that you bring this up because it's the double standards that we avoid from religiosity that we are playing when we play this with this culture of the critical social theory that is like, oh, if he is successful and does not fit the narrative, or if it doesn't fit the narrative, I will ignore like the confirmation bias. But if it fits the narrative, I can, like, if in the end this person doesn't succeed, I can play the card of victim of being, so it is double standard on that. Okay, if you
It
find
does happen.
someone
But there are some people who are genuinely victims.
manipulation of that, I think.
I mean, it's weird. It's so complicated and so messy. There are some people who they don't make it because they're locked out, because they are pushed down and locked out of opportunities because of the color of their skin. And then there are other people who simply don't accept the responsibility of being part of society, and they throw out the race card to excuse the fact that they didn't succeed. That's not a popular thing to say, but
Yeah.
that doesn't negate the fact that we are seeing it. The racism is far from dead in this country. We're seeing it emboldened and empowered in this political climate. And I think the right thing to do is to be humanists about it and to try to advocate for people who have long been locked down or locked out, and to try to do the right thing to help correct an error of history and society. But that means, like you say, we have to talk to each other, not at each other. And all this
Yeah.
stuff does not fit in a Twitter post. It's complicated, it's messy, it's complex. There are no easy answers. But goodness sakes, let's stop attacking each other over these hot button issues and let's try to just figure it out together as allies. That would be refreshing for sure.
That would be amazing. Yeah. So can you tell us, so before we close, a little bit about you writing a book? Tell us a little bit about, or what you can tell us about.
No, yeah, this is book number 4 for me. It's called Confessions of a Former Fox News Christian. Now, Fox News in the United States is a hard right news network that aligns very much with a single political party. And it's so far right that people have stopped and said, hey, what the hell's going on here? I mean, there's bias all over the media. So don't get me wrong. But the
Mm-hmm.
Fox News has been really interesting. And I used to be a Fox News watcher, and they believe the country is Judeo-Christian, belongs to Christianity. They are hugely deferential to a Republican White House and run those stories all the time about Christians being persecuted in this country, which is total crap. The war on Christmas, and they're trying to kill Jesus. And that's what this network does. And I used to believe it. I used to listen to right-wing radio and read conservative books, and I used to be that guy. And so what I did was I went back and kind of reverse engineered my own viewpoints. And so the book gets into, where does Fox News come from? Who are the power players? Let's get into right-wing radio, Rush Limbaugh, Michael Savage, Glenn Beck, etc. We get into the American gun culture. That's always fun. And I'm a gun owner, but I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are some people who just get wacky. We talk about abortion and the battles over reproductive rights in this country. We talk about the founding fathers and the fact that they weren't religious people. Many of them were not religious people. And then at
Oh
the end
yeah,
of the,
yeah. You interviewed Andrew Silo.
yeah,
Oh
this
yeah. So
this
it's
lie that they tell
great.
us that they were all a bunch of Jesus believers, it's just crap. It's just crap. And so we get into that. And in the last chapter of the book, I kind of tweak some of my fellow liberals, as you would call them, the woke crowd, who've just lost the plot. I mean, I'm a proud liberal. I hold to liberal ideals and ideas. But there's just some people who sit around all day and bitch and moan and in a state of constant offense and knee jerk, and their dogmatic purity test and microaggressions. Oh man, and they're killing me. So I thought, to be fair, I should take at least one chapter and talk about some of the arsonists in my own house and say, we just need to We just need to stop. But it's called Confessions of a Former Fox News Christian. I'm doing autographed pre-orders. The book officially releases in about 2 months, but you can go to sethandrews.com and you can pre-order there and I'll autograph it for you. So just go to sethandrews.com.
Thank you very much, Seth. People, go check the book, go check the other books, and go check the channel. It's like 10 years. There is 10 years for you guys to catch on. I hope people from República Ateia, that we're opening, the Atheist Republic in Brazilian Portuguese, going to get a lot of people that maybe could be speaking some English and checking out the material.
How did you say that? How did you say Atheist Republic?
In Portuguese?
Yes.
República Ateia.
República? Oh, God, I'm butchering it. I'm so sorry.
No, you're doing very well.
Ateia?
Yeah.
So you can I learned something new today. I learned something new. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Ateia. That's
okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So yeah, go check Seth Andrews, the Thinking Atheist. It's good to tell people that you always receiving on the podcast ex-believers. So it's how they can actually empathize and feel that you're not alone. You know, it's something that Brazilian atheists feel a lot. Sometimes are in those bubble wrapped communities, completely wrapped on the bubble and cannot get out. And so thank you very much, Seth. And thank you guys for watching, and see you next video.
Thank you very much.